before. Oh,
you can go do it, and I'll just get started on the talk. Go get your coffee. This is how it works when we just jump to live. Occasionally, you have one guest, and they need to get a coffee break as we get started. This is Too Many Points on the Tell Me More podcast. I'm your host, Mac Moore. The empty seat across from you will be Nick Adams once he gets coffee. We're going to be talking today about the NFL playoffs. This was a fun weekend. There's also a little bit of news, obviously, as the playoffs are going. Various coaching hires, a little bit that happened before this week. And then as teams fall off with the new rules for hiring coaches, there are ones that once that team is eliminated, that's the moment they get to talk to them again. So it's interesting to see how that kind of played out this year because Eric Bieniemy, who we already know is an interesting story, offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. Basically, I think the opinion I've heard a lot is if he doesn't get hired, there is going to be a hellstorm in terms of the fact that the Rooney Rule does not work for getting more diversity hires, getting more black coaches, head coaches, because there's not a better resume than Eric Bieniemy has. And even if you account for the fact that the last two offensive coordinators that got head coaching jobs from the Andy Reid tree have failed, it still doesn't make sense that Eric Bieniemy wouldn't be first in line to get one of these jobs. And now the thing in the way is, because nobody interviewed him before the end of that new window where they could interview him at the end of the season rather than just trying to wait out for the team to get eliminated from the playoffs. Everybody missed that window. So now Eric Bieniemy, once the Chiefs are done, which they keep chugging, even Patrick Mahomes leaving the game. He only needed 3 quarters to beat the Browns. The Chiefs might go pretty far this year. It might take a little while, but those head coaching jobs are going fast. So we will talk about those, but I think we'll mostly focus on the games because another fun weekend. I think without a doubt, divisional round is the best weekend. Like once you get to conference, I enjoy it. I know that it's fun, but you know, the 2 games versus 4 games and then having just eventually there's a certain number of fans that obviously NFL is the best at having, fans of the game versus fans of a team. But you're still going to have that drop off. You're not going to have as many people that are carrying. Like eventually you have the people that are like, I don't want to root for Tom Brady to make it to another Super Bowl. So that divisional round is usually the one that has enough teams, enough fan bases, enough intrigue. And even if you get what was a slow game like the Saints Bucks to end it, they found a way to make that exciting down the stretch. So that's the beauty of NFL, and divisional round is great. I do think Super Wildcard Weekend is giving it a run for its money, because I had a hell of a good time last weekend just being able to live football for 2 straight days and have nothing else happen in my life. But divisional round, I'll settle for it. It's pretty good. Nick, how did you enjoy the divisional round? Do you agree that that's the best weekend in football, at least now? A little bit of competition with Super Wildcard, but generally speaking, divisional round's the best weekend of football in the year.
I think, I would probably agree with that. I think because there's like chaos with it a little bit more, and it feels like a little bit more, some kind of randomness can happen, but of course you have the best teams in play. Whereas like the wild card weekend, we kind of knew that, of course, the 1 seeds were sitting out, and so something was missing from like those 6 games. And so when you have what would it be, like the 8 best teams essentially playing on the same weekend. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And there was random chaos this last weekend. So
yeah. Did you think the Super Wild Card got rid of some of that though? Because normally it's the top 4 teams are sitting out the first week, and then now just the top 2, 1 from each conference. And they kind of added to the extra matchups where there was even more good football, even though I still think this one, like, it didn't play out perfectly. I had fun, but it wasn't like if I was just looking individually at games, there wasn't a lot of great games that weekend. But it didn't matter. It's football nonstop for 24 hours.
I like the Nickelodeon experiment last weekend, and I think more channels should have football, and you breed in, like, what would the History Channel football game look like? You know, and it'd be like old-timey footage or something.
No doubt.
Going on. Or what would, the MTV version?
It just looks like the Saints Buccaneers game is the History Channel version.
Oh.
But Yeah, no, I think that's good. It's something I've pitched a long time ago, and I had people, it's always weird because I was like in college, like 4 years late as I didn't get my life together. So I'm sitting around with a bunch of like 18 to 21-year-olds, and I'm like, you know, you could have 4 different broadcasts like of the same game, and you could pick the announcers, you could do this, all of it's going to be interactive, and you can pick. And I had these 18-year-olds like, why the hell would I want that? Like, football's already perfect, asshole. And I was like, all right,
Yeah.
boomer. I was calling 18-year-olds boomer. It was a good time. But
Sense.
well, they had mindsets of old people. Like, they didn't want change. And I'm like, you can't be that dead set at 18 and not changing things. But like, those are the things I talked about. But I didn't really think of it as like channels. But then you started to see in the last couple of years, ESPN's doing it. They have like the mega cast, they have the film room, they're finding like 4 different ways. And a lot of them they are putting on the actual channel. Some of them are just you get on ESPN3, and that's kind of the move. I think we'll see that much more often as a larger percentage of the viewing audience is streaming versus watching from cable. You'll start to see that become more of the. I just don't know how many will be like, all right, every channel is going to get some sort of. I guess that's a good way to make money. Is like History Channel throws down 30 million. Like you just start getting every single one to do it.
Yeah, I imagine there'd be some kind of surreal and unsettling Adult Swim version of football.
We were talking last week. It was like ABC Family is like called Freeform now. I only found that out because my co-host told me that was one of the channels where the ESPN broadcast was on. I'm like, well, I didn't even know. So there's ones I still need to check out.
The HGTV, and they like start redesigning the field during the game with the Property Brothers and stuff. And so
they flip a player's house that he didn't even know they were going into flip. It's like a combo of Punk'd and HGTV. It'd be a good time. Bring in Ashton Kutcher. I think it works. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of fun experimenting stuff that I'm interested in seeing where they go with it. But we're not going to talk about that too much. We're going to put a pin in that. We're going to save it. You do have to get out of here pretty quick. This might be the shortest podcast ever, and I do want to get around to some of the games. We'll start with the Chiefs because obviously I'm wearing the Chiefs gear. It's the only part of my like being a sports journalist, trying to be unbiased. I will never get rid of that. I guess if I ever became a Chiefs beat writer, I would have to purge myself of my bias, but I couldn't do it. I root for them openly, and I'm not going to hide it. That game, I've told people I've had a different mindset than a lot of people. Like Patrick Mahomes, the moment, and I keep saying it's when he started the first time against the Broncos that first year when they just kind of threw him in relief duty, and you're like, that's a starting quarterback. But I wasn't upset when the Chiefs lost to the Patriots in the conference championship, more so than like in the moment mad at what's happening. But I didn't like leave with this sense of dread, which I think a lot of Chiefs have kind of kept, and they still can't get rid of. Chiefs have won a Super Bowl, and fans still have this like impending doom that they're worried about, And I'm woo-sawing the whole way. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, everything is gravy at this point. Getting the Super Bowl, having Patrick Mahomes tied up for 10 years, like all those things. And I know it's like, well, what if he gets injured next year? It's like, we got to watch Patrick Mahomes be awesome for 3 years. That's what we got. I think I would want it to be more. I don't want him to get injured. But if it happened, I'm going to be satisfied with what we have, and everything else, just gravy, guys. But a lot of Chiefs fans don't have that. And sure enough, that plays out, and Patrick Mahomes getting hurt. Once you see him kind of fall down, and I'm still unsure of whether it was a concussion or whether he just got choked out really fast as the guy's arm is under his throat all the way through the tackle. But he ends up falling down. He doesn't get to finish the game. And enough people have a sense of humor to start anything as possible from the get-go. And sure enough, that's how it played out. We got to watch Chad Henne not even score to get them wins, but he moved the ball just enough and threw his body on the line. And that finish with, and I was yelling at the TV. I was so mad at the ref. I'm like, that's a first down. And I see the first replay. But never mind. My bad, ref. You guys are good. Because, like, the refs shouldn't have been able to see that as perfectly as they did. They get it wrong a lot, but he got it. That was the spot. That was exactly where the ball was. So you see those moments, and for them to go for it, and, like, I'm, like, yelling at the TV. Well, I'm not yelling. I'm calmly, like, just contradicting the announcers who are like, gonna run the clock out and gonna then send the punt team out. I'm like, nope. Waste every second and then quickly go. Just, I don't care what happens. Erratic, do it. And sure enough, that's exactly what the play call was. Finally, Andy Reid is getting that Madden play calling, and I love it. And that's with Chad Henne in the game. Nick, are you more surprised with the outcome or that Andy Reid has gotten so aggressive with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback? Even when it's Chad Henne coming in, he does not change. That is the new Andy Reid, aggressive Andy.
I wasn't surprised, but it was kind of in the meta way because I was thinking beforehand, I was like, Tony Romo's predictions have been a little bit off this game. There have been a couple of times where it's like he was making a call, doing his, Roamsterdramus thing, and being off a little bit. So when he's saying, they're not even going to call sub, they're not even going to call a play, I'm like, well, you're not doing so great, Tony Romo. And so when they did hike it, he lost his mind. And I was like, well, that kind of tracks for the game. And of course, then I was really relieved. And, props to Andy Reid. It was shocking, but not surprising. Or maybe that's first.
I think Tony Romo's thinking from the perspective of what Andy would do. And I think he probably he made some misses when Patrick Mahomes was in the game. Mm-hmm. But he's trying to think back. Okay, we know what Andy does with Patrick, but you can't call the same plays. You can't do the same stuff. But then you have to remember, he did it with Alex Smith that final year, which he should have done it before that. They should have gone for that much earlier. Alex Smith has one of his best years, arguably an MVP caliber season, his final year with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then he did it with Chad Henne in relief of Patrick Mahomes when he got injured last year. Mm-hmm. And he's had that success. So Andy Reid started to feel, it's like, okay, before there was concern because one, NFL was a lot different back when he had Donovan McNabb, even when he had Michael Vick for a little bit. It was different when they pull in Alex Smith, and literally the reason you got him was to be checked down Charlie, to never take a big risk. And like it makes sense that Andy Reid would need Patrick Mahomes to do that. He'll need to see the success of it. And then seeing the success of anybody playing in that offense. It's like, obviously Patrick Mahomes is ridiculously good at playing the quarterback position. But when Andy Reid made plays that are trying to make Patrick Mahomes better, it turned out like, if you look at it, any quarterback doing those plays is going to make them better. Like, look what the Rams are doing with Jared Goff. Look what all these teams that have found quarterbacks. When Ryan Tannehill goes from, chump to champ. I mean, he didn't actually win anything, but he went to a place where he's actually good at football. He gets to stay in the NFL and be a starting quarterback on a team that is, this last year, puts up the most points in the NFL. Like, you can make these quarterbacks a lot better by doing those same things. That it goes back to those like same conversations when somebody won't punt. And it's like, well, yeah, but the offense isn't good. I'm like, yeah, the reason, if they're not good, that's more incentive for you to take those chances. Like, you're the worst team. You have to find a comparative advantage. And instead, they clamp up. They get scared. And in that moment, Andy Reid had learned enough times. It's like, every time I take the conservative route, we lose. And at worst, I'm going to get blamed for trying too hard to win. Forget about it.
They were around midfield. And so I don't think the difference, if you punt the ball and kick it, out of the back of the end zone, you're talking about a difference of 30 yards with 2 minutes left to go. I don't think it was it wasn't the world's biggest risk. The Browns starting at the 50 versus starting at their own 20 or 25 or whatever.
Yeah, although with the way the Browns are moving the ball, the way that you are one touchdown away. So, like, if you put somebody at the 20-yard line, they have a better chance of getting into field goal range, right? Like, that is reasonable, but still, it's very hard to score a touchdown, like, if your defense plays well. If you're at the 50, it becomes entirely pressure on the defense to stop them from scoring a touchdown. And in this case, the touchdown is a win for the Browns, So, like, there is a reason to say, hey, do whatever you can to punt them deep. Don't take too big of a risk. But at the 50, it's not the worst risk. Mm-hmm. I would go for it at the 40. I don't like punts. I don't like field goals. I was mad in that game. Like, most of the field goals.
There's a lot of field goal attempts.
Yeah. And most of the field goals, in fairness, were in the right situations. This was like this whole playoffs. There's been a lot of bad punts and field goals that are like, no, just go for it. Like, those 3 points aren't helping you, bro. This one for the Chiefs, like, into the half. I I believe one was like 4th and 15. Like there's ones where it's like, okay, only a crazy person like me playing Madden would go for the first down. I still think they should do it. I still believe with Patrick Mahomes, you're basically playing Madden. When Chad Henne's in, maybe change it a little bit. But I do think that, most of the time I would just go for it. And in that situation, I could see where Andy Reid would have punted it. If you have Patrick in, yeah, go for it. If you have Chad Henne in, maybe not. I'm glad he went for it because I was just like yelling at the TV, like, just do it. Like, this is the best time. You've already taken the most time off the clock. And that's really the key. Once you do that, that field position is good, but punting the ball, like you said, not too far back at the 20, they still have a pretty good chance of scoring, of trying to get the lead. Like, if you go for the 1 yard, like we saw, you win the game. So that 50% chance, like whatever the chance is of the Browns scoring, is still so high that why wouldn't you go for what is, if you get this, it's over now. Like, always go for that. Why waste our time? Just make us happy. Like, that's a good time. And then if you don't make it, you still have a percentage chance of stopping them. You should be able to stop them. And they always say it is like, you don't trust the defense. I'm like, really? You trust the defense more if you're like, all right, if they don't get this yard, you better stop them at the 50, guys. Like, everything's backwards in game theory from what announcers tell you every day. It's just like, I know, like, there are a lot of coaches that say the same thing. That's why the announcers end up saying it, but it's dumb. It's the exact opposite. And all you need is coaches that are better at explaining that to their players when they're like, this is what we're going to do, guys. There's not a single player. There's not a defensive player that's going to be like, yeah, punt it. We'd rather give us more room to stop them.
I would support any team that just puts a computer in as head coach and plays a completely statistical probability game.
I think what you have to have is you need coaches that know the ins and outs of the game. Because we can't walk in and be a better coach. We could maybe be a better play caller if we had enough time to learn the playbook. But like, generally speaking, it's like it's the decision making. It's like, all right, right here, do you punt or do you go for it? Do you pass or do you run? Like, there are decisions that coaches for some reason just have not played enough Madden to figure it out. But in terms of if you told an offensive coordinator, hey, you're going for it here, pass it, they're better at picking the play that will work, So that's what you really need. You need the computer to like shoot out decisions at them. And they're like, fine, follow it. Based on what you told me to do, I know the perfect thing to make this happen.
The Statue of Liberty play.
every time. And that's what the computer picks every time. It's like, maybe don't trust that. I had fun. We're never going to get to the finer points of the game other than that was just really fun to watch the end of. Is there anything else from the Chiefs game that really stood out? Obviously, I'm going to talk later in the week about next week's game and preview the conference championship, and that's when we'll get to, will Patrick Mahomes be okay? 5 days out is usually the link.
Okay. Look, I mean, I was surprised when he went out with the concussion. It seemed like he was stumbling. Because it didn't seem like his head hit the ground that hard, or wasn't like a helmet-to-helmet thing. And so I was like, not like, what a sissy, but it was like, oh, then when somebody's saying, oh, he probably got choked out, and you see that made more sense to me. And so I would bet that he clears concussion protocol as quickly as, the NFL allows
it's tough because like it didn't look like some of the bigger hits you see when there's a concussion, but there was the helmet going onto the ball and then onto the field, and it's like this double hit that you're like, okay, that's where it could have happened. And it was just, I would say it did not look like he just stumbled, like I just kind of fell. Like, it without a doubt, it's like he got up, he's like, I'm good, and then and they pick him back up, and you're like, that's not good. And I would say that there's a chance it was a choke out.
He might have been drunk as well. So we could come forward.
Always a possibility. That is what Nick Adams looks like at family barbecues. So there is a chance that's what happened to Patrick there. But I'm a little concerned because like facing that Bills team, especially right now, and it's not even like Josh Allen is playing lights out. Like, he was playing lights out to end the year, and the first 2 playoff games, like, there's this conversation like he's at that level right now, but really Lamar Jackson is getting taken to task for how bad he played in that game. And until that second half, there's an argument to be made that Lamar Jackson was outplaying Josh Allen. Like, the stats are in his favor. He's got the running stats to go with it. And the only thing that I would give for Josh Allen is I think we all know that Josh Allen was facing a tougher defense in the Ravens than Lamar was facing in the Buffalo Bills. There were plays where Josh Allen is fitting the ball into the smallest of windows. And while we normally watch Stephon Diggs just get open and you're like, well, that's why Josh Allen is better. Stephon Diggs is getting wide open down the field. There were plays where it was Josh Allen making the play. And obviously Stephon Diggs and the other receivers had to pull it in. But Josh Allen was on the money with very little room to work. So I wouldn't actually say Josh Allen was losing to Lamar Jackson in the QB battle in that game. But the stats were close, and it literally flipped on Josh Allen marching down the field, scoring the touchdown, and then when Lamar tried to do the same, he throws the interception in the end zone.
A 14-point swing in 10 seconds. So, yeah, that closed that. And the Bills, it's fitting that they've made it all the way to the conferences, the AFC conference, because if they're like most Bills in my life, I ignore them. And now all of a sudden it's a big deal. And it's like, oh, I've seen this play out before. So props to them. I would have never, I don't think I picked them, the last couple of games. So
yeah, I've been pretty high on the Bills. I was high on Josh Allen, just thinking he'd have a better year. Like, there was very few people who would have put money down that Josh Allen was going to have a statistical season that rivaled Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, but he did. And I thought it would improve. I thought the idea that, I feel like even though the history of the game suggests you're not going to improve after that second year with kind of the trajectory of his career, it's like, yeah, but we're also in a different era, different styles of football. And there's been very few situations that met the same criteria. Guy who didn't play quarterback all that long, played at a small school like Wyoming, didn't have good players around him until he gets to Buffalo, arguably didn't have it then, is being taught how to play and like literally went through especially the first year and then the second year, he was relying on his legs in ways that makes it where, and it's the same argument, I think running quarterbacks get knocked too hard for they're not a good passer. And it's like, well, some of them are good passers. Like, you have to judge both skill sets. I think the one thing that's missed is running quarterbacks often take themselves out of plays where they don't get the reps, seeing the read, moving through your progressions. And that can be a problem. But in Josh Allen's case, he got 2 years to work on it, work on his mechanics. And at no point was Josh Allen's job in jeopardy. That's the difference between all the other quarterbacks that were in similar situations, didn't play well the first couple of years, and then didn't improve. Well, of course they didn't improve. You pulled them. You didn't let them play more than 2 years. In this situation, it helped that Buffalo was, got to closer to making the playoffs. Once you get to winning records, then it's not a problem. Once you're on the bubble, it's like, okay, we'll give this guy another year. Apparently that gets you, Mitch Trubisky might get a new contract from just making the playoffs barely. So I think with Josh Allen, watching it play out, I think even more than that, Buffalo didn't care what the results were. They knew this was a long-term project. They weren't going to buckle on it. And Buffalo fans have dealt with such terrible teams for so long. They didn't argue with it. It was like Philadelphia tanking. They knew we weren't going to win for a while. And they're like, all right, as long as you have a real plan, we'll follow you into battle. And sure enough, it worked out for Buffalo. So I was excited for him. I wouldn't say I was necessarily going to peg them into the AFC Championship game until later in the season. I did, it was Chiefs and Bills for me, but that's because I'm a lazy gambler. I went with chalk, and that almost worked this weekend, except for a game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers end up beating Drew Brees. And what we find out before the game is Drew Brees' last game in the Superdome, and then turns out last game that he's going to play if he does hold up and ends up retiring. So going to that game real fast. Yeah. You love storylines. I think you love them even more than football sometimes. Judge that. Give me if that's a script you're reading. How good is that script for Tom Brady, the washed up superstar, but proven he's just as good as he ever was, kind of. And then Drew Brees, where he's that gunslinger who always was good at picking apart, didn't have a great arm. Now he has zero arm, and that's literally the difference in the Saints being able to beat the Buccaneers. It's not on anybody else. It came down to Drew Brees not being able to get the job done.
It has certainly complicated my perceptions of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, actually, more than Tom Brady versus Drew Brees. Because I think of Tom Brady, I used to sell Tom Brady short. The main reason being when he was injured one season, the Patriots still went something like 10-6. And so I thought
11-5 and didn't make the playoffs with
11,
Matt Castle.
Matt Castle here. And so it's like, oh, so Brady is good for what, 2 extra wins on the Patriots? And that's why I always kind of held that against Brady. And so in some ways, this season to me has been like one of Brady's most impressive seasons in terms of just what I was expecting from him to then what he's done. And I would say best quarterback ever. I think he is quarterback GOAT right now. And I don't like him still. And so I told you before last weekend on DraftKings, of course, I drafted him. I drafted just a lot of the Buccaneers, and I won $2.
Well done.
And the whole time I'm like, oh, Jesus, Brady's doing well. He's running for a touchdown. He's throwing touchdowns. And then meanwhile, Bill Belichick, who, of course, I'm not supposed to like, he's snubbing Donald Trump, but he's probably also like, stewing, looking out his window at Tom Brady playing in the street and being like, damn kids,
Did you just describe him as Squidward? Are you just trying really hard to get back to Nickelodeon?
Yes, it is like that. Yeah. Where like, Patrick and SpongeBob are having fun.
And without a doubt, Rob Gronkowski is Patrick's star, so that works out perfectly. I think for me, I'm not willing to even start that because I think if anything, like in terms of Tom Brady, like if there was this question mark, I think that can be gone. But I don't think the opposite. I don't think it's like this like teeter-totter. I think for Bill Belichick, I've learned nothing that is like taking away from Bill Belichick. I think any effort to look at what happened this season and hold it against him, I think is nonsense. I think the fact that they lost, that the offense was held together by Tom Brady, right? You don't have the skilled players. All of this is missing. And then on defense, which was the focal point, which is the thing that almost made you a playoff team last year, you lose half of them. They sit out because of COVID. Like, that team is not there, and the idea that he was supposed to do anything with it other than gamble with Cam Newton and see what happens is it's ridiculous. I did not learn anything from Bill Belichick, even if I am more impressed with Tom Brady after what he's accomplished this season. So I think it's one moved up, the other one stayed put for me, and that's the best way I have to describe it.
Yeah, and I guess I was conflating the medal, the presidential medal of, was it Medal of Freedom, whatever. That he turned down as far as like a Belichick storyline within the last week or two.
Yeah, and I don't even think he turned it down because of Trump. It probably Trump did another pay for play and asked for like $2 million of Belichick. Like, why would I pay money for this thing? And that's what ended negotiations. We'll find out. It'll be released in a story from like the Washington Post in like a couple weeks. Don't worry about it. Okay. I think the big takeaway was for Tom Brady, but even then, like, Tom Brady wasn't having a good game until the second half. Like when you look at it, it was 2 games, Tom Brady and Drew Brees, that it's like, yes, this is the old timers. They get one last hurrah, and it was going poorly. And then, of course, the big thing with Tom Brady has always been he pulls it together at the end, and I think he still finishes. He's like 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, and like I think probably like six yards per pass, maybe, which you could argue with Tom Brady. He's always had a little bit lower average yards compared to the other really great quarterbacks. He's always just picking little plays here and there. But that's the argument for Drew Brees as well. And Drew Brees completely fell apart. Got Michael Thomas back, and it didn't do a bit of difference. And, the big thing for a while was Peyton Manning was the stats leader, and then Tom Brady was he got it done in the playoffs. But his legacy was cemented before he had to do a damn thing. Like, Tom Brady had defenses that led the way. And then it's like, well, yeah, he was clutch, but it helped to have that. Regular season stats said there was a huge gap between him and Peyton. Well, by 2007, when they put together the best team ever and the best offense ever, that started to change. And you thought maybe it's for 1 year. You had Randy Moss. Of course he's going to do that. No, Tom Brady changed the way he played. And for the next, 12 years, he's putting up those what would be called Peyton Manning stats, Drew Brees stats, Star Wars stats, whatever it is. And he got himself back in that conversation. And it looked like the Peyton argument was going to lose because Peyton wasn't even going to have that. Drew Brees was going to have that. Now Tom Brady's going to play till 46. He's going to take that too. He's going to be the all-time leader in everything. He's going to have all those Super Bowls. He's going to be the reason for the second, the first three. He was a huge factor, but there are people that are going to detract and say defense did it. That's not true with the other ones. It was Tom Brady all the way, and he's just going to keep racking them up. I hope that it ends now because I'm not hoping Aaron Rodgers beat. I don't actually know who I'd rather Patrick Mahomes faces in a Super Bowl. I think either one works.
I don't want the State Farm Super Bowl. I find that annoying. So
I'm fine with it. As long as we need Jake from State Farm to be like a ref or an announcer. Maybe he's in the SpongeBob role. I don't know, but I'm fine with it. I think both are good. I think the similarities between Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes are so vivid. And the problem was that Patrick Mahomes got good and was doing this just as Aaron Rodgers' stats were kind of dropping. And this year, Aaron Rodgers is back on the throne. He gets himself to that level again. I would love to see those two go toe-to-toe as the greatest arms in the history of the game that also were hella accurate, hella smart, and can get the job done with their legs. At the same time, that revenge against Tom Brady, where it's like, all right, you won with the Patriots. Now Tom Brady thinks he gets to do with the Buccaneers. That cements his legacy. If we're talking about, comparing it to Bill Belichick, if Tom Brady wins a Super Bowl on his own, now those were mine. Those aren't Bill Belichick's. Those are mine. And if Patrick Mahomes would be the one who stops him to get revenge for that AFC Championship game 2 years ago, it would be. I would love it. It would be such a good.
I like those storylines as well. I put the most pressure probably on Aaron Rodgers though, because I think his legacy could fluctuate the most with a win or loss next week. So
that's true. And Josh Allen's is. I think he doesn't lose a lot, but he gains a lot if he can beat the Chiefs. Just making it to the Super Bowl, which in Buffalo Bills history is literally the only thing. You don't have to win the Super Bowl. Just make it a bunch of times. So Josh Allen could be well on his way. I also don't think he loses anything by losing this game.
Is Jim Kelly the greatest? Wait, was it Jim Kelly, the Bills?
Yeah, greatest Bills player. You can make some arguments for some running backs, but it's Jim Kelly.
No, I was just going to say greatest quarterback ever.
No, but he should be in the conversation more than he is for how often he made it there. But we have a all or nothing winning philosophy in sports, so none of that mattered. Jim Kelly actually accomplished 0 things in his career, is what I'm told. So Josh Allen can do it. A lot of good storylines. That's probably the best part is as much as we kind of deride chalk, I love crazy stuff happening in the first couple weeks, but if we get to 1-2 as the matchup, or in this case, the 1-3 where the Saints, I still think the Saints were the better team. I think they're arguably better than the Packers if they are playing right. And obviously, Drew Brees, he wasn't even playing at that kind of diminished level we saw during the regular season when they were winning. I'm not ready to say they would have been better off with Taysom Hill and that running offense as their answer, but maybe. I made the argument last week that Nate Sudfeld might have been better than Ben Roethlisberger. So, I'm willing to make some crazy hot takes at this point. It was still fun though. It was a fun weekend, a lot of good matchups, and I'm excited for on Thursday when we come back and end up talking about those individual matchups and what to watch for, because those are perfect storylines. I think maybe Saints, just because if they would have made it, there's talk of what they did when they got knocked out by the Vikings. They've had some run-ins with the Packers. Drew Brees' last run as well is still a good story. But obviously with Tom Brady and the fact that he can never lose, and now he's trying to be ageless into his he's going to get to his mid-40s soon, and it's going to be ridiculous. That's probably the better story always. But it's also the best moment is when he loses. So I would have been fine with him losing last night. He didn't. We'll save a week, or we'll save a couple weeks. Just need Tom Brady to lose. That's all I need for the NFL season. Anything else that you want to hit? I do. We mentioned the 14-point swing of the Lamar Jackson interception. It reminded me of the swing of Dan Sorensen hitting the ball. So 2 controversies in one play. You got the dive into the end zone, knocks the ball out. One is people saying, well, that's helmet to helmet. They didn't call it, and they haven't been calling it all playoffs. Been a lot of the kind of, there was almost like an overcorrection because people were complaining during the regular season. Why are you calling this? Now they've called nothing. And then number 2 is what is either the worst rule in football or people that are like, I'm fine with it. People deserve to have a penalty for fumbling it into the end zone. How do you feel about that rule? Let's start with that rule because that might be the biggest controversy. Do you think that rule needs to be changed? That if you fumble at the 1 yard line, it's fine, no repercussions. If you fumble into the end zone, from the same position, ball has a different trajectory. Back of the end zone, you lose it.
No, I don't think I wouldn't support a rule change. I think there should be punishment for fumbling forwards towards the end zone.
So the difference is forward. Like you did the same move, you lost the ball. It's the same blunder, but because the ball went forward, now you're in trouble.
Yes,
by 1 yard, by half a foot.
Yeah, because
for you.
I'm not about to support the end of the game where people could kick the ball forward instead of doing like laterals, and just kind of boot the ball randomly to the end zone, and maybe we'll recover the ball in the end zone for a touchdown or something like that.
That's not a thing. You're describing rules that don't exist. In this case, the rules everywhere else on the field, you fumble it and it goes out of bounds. There isn't a punishment. The ball just comes back to where it's at. So what is the
ball if somebody recovers the ball?
But that's the thing. In this case, we're talking about they've done what they need to do. Smart football says run to the sideline, and if you're going to dive for extra yards, that's the best place because if it pops out, it goes out of bounds. And this is the one place on the field where a half foot changes whether it is a smart move to dive for it or you lost the ball and they are back on the 20-yard line.
Hold on to the ball.
But that's the case for the guy who goes out at the 1. What's the repercussions for the guy who loses at the 1 yard line?
Well, he wasn't going to get a touchdown.
Then that's the repercussion for the guy who loses it into the end zone. Doesn't get a touchdown.
Yeah.
But you're not saying that. You're saying the rule should be he loses the ball and then goes back to the 20 for the other team.
I'm fine with how it is. I don't understand, I guess I don't understand other people's outrage, I guess. I don't.
Because it's inconsistent with what happens when you fumble the ball out of bounds. It's literally an excessive punishment because the ball decided to go forward out of bounds rather than straight to the sideline. So I'm confused why you think it's the same thing and you're like, punish them. Take the ball away.
I don't have a defense for it.
All right. A lot of people, their argument is if you're going to change it, just put the offense back on the 20-yard line. Like, because you tried so hard to get in the end zone, now instead of starting at the 1, you go back to the 20 because it got fumbled out through the end zone. And you have to, if you were on 3rd and goal, and you do that, now you're on 4th and goal from the 20. So there's a huge ramification, but you're also not giving the ball back in a scoring situation. And the difference being that, like I said, to have it where you keep the ball because it's out of the 1 versus it goes in the end zone, you've lost possession. That's such a huge variance rather than, okay, be smart, don't lose the ball because that is the penalty. But it's also not you lose the ball. Now you're just stuck kicking a field goal, which is what you probably would have done if you're a dumb coach and you're on 4th and goal from the 1. You would probably get a field goal anyways.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We can continue it some other time, but I'm going to have to jump off.
That's the end of it. And this is the most succinct podcast we did. And we even went over Nick's time. I'm sorry, Nick. I love to yell about these rules, but we'll be back later in the week. We plan to have Thursday, 11 a.m. We're going to have our conference championship preview, but that's all we have for Too Many Points on the Tell Me More podcast. Later, folks.
Bye.